Good evening, Year 12 parents and students. I'm going to give you some HSC course information at the very beginning of the HSC course. Now, I know we're in Term 4, but as you know, the HSC course begins in Term 4 of Year 11, right from the first day of Term 4, and students have already begun doing HSC work in a number of courses. I'm going to be providing you some information about the whole HSC course and assessment related to that HSC course as well. So, the first thing, however, before we get to the HSC course, is some students have approached me in the last few weeks of last term asking about changing courses or changing subjects. Now, changing subjects in the HSC is generally not available and not appropriate. All HSC courses are 2-year courses. So that means they need to be studied for all of Year 11 and all of Year 12. And so that means that it isn't possible to change to a different HSC course at the beginning of Year 12 because the Year 11 course hasn't been studied. The exception to that is levels of courses within a particular subject. So for instance, you might be in Advanced English and you might be thinking of changing your level to Standard English. So those level changes in English, Maths and RE are possible, but will require a discussion and an analysis of your results and a discussion whether that's in your best interests, both for your HSC results and in your HSC pathway and any possible career pathways you might have after the HSC. So if you are thinking of doing that, you'll need to have a discussion with Mrs. Martin. So Mrs. Martin will be filling in that role while I'm away this term, and you'll need to do that discussion with her, and any changes then will be made on the blue form, a blue change of subject form as normal, and you return them back to her, and those changes will then be made and will be made from the beginning of week 3 and ongoing from there. If we move now to some of the HSC rules that apply for Year 12, and that means that in order for you to be a satisfactory student in Year 12, you must follow all the NESA rules. Now that you can see those rules there on the screen, on the PowerPoint in front of you, and they are no different to what they were in Year 11, but obviously they have an extra level of importance because this is the final year. This is where the HSC is applied. Mostly what I want to highlight there is that you as a student, you need to work with diligence and sustained effort throughout the entire HSC course. So that's from today all the way through to your HSC exams in exactly 12 months' time. If you don't work with that diligence and sustained effort, we will start to be concerned of your progress, and NESA requires us, me, to warn you and to make sure that you are on track. And if you're not, it is our responsibility to take action to intervene. You also have to complete 50% of all assessments. And that's a minimum. You might think 50% doesn't sound, well, everybody should complete 100%. The vast majority of students do. And we want all students to complete all assessment tasks. But it is a requirement that all students complete at minimum more than 50% of assessment. And if you start to get if we start to get concerned that that's not going to be the case, I will intervene and we will send you warning letters regarding that, and they are NESA rules. Lastly, you have to make a genuine attempt at the HSC exam. Your HSC course goes all the way through to the end of each HSC exam that you have for each course. It doesn't finish at the end of Term 3 next year when formal school classes finish. It finishes when you finish the last minute of that last HSC exam. On the screen you can see an example of the certificate that you might get at the end of HSC, and that's the way it will look, and that's your record of achievement. And that will also contain all of your Year 10 and Year 11 results as well. And you might remember back in Year 10, I warned you about this, that all results for the last 3 years of schooling are contained on your record of achievement when you leave school at the end of Year 12. Let's have a look at determining some HSC marks. As you probably know, all HSC marks are 50% the school-based assessment mark and 50% your HSC exam mark. And they are simply added together to give you a mark out of 100, 50% from both. And that is why your school-based assessment work that you do over the next 12 months is critical in obtaining the best possible HSC mark that you can. So the better you can perform in your assessment marks and assessment tasks, the better you'll perform in your HSC exams. But you might say to me, but the school down the road, they mark very easily. They lots of 90s down there, and I only get 75s here because you mark much harder. So let's have a look at what NESA does with those results to make sure that it's equitable across schools. What happens is there is a moderation process that NESA put into place, and that moderation process is based on the HSC raw marks that you achieve in your HSC exams. Different schools will have different marking scales and different assessment tasks and different types of tasks, and so NESA puts this moderation process in place so to eliminate the possibility that one school is advantaged over another school. If you have a look at the graphic there that's on the screen about the two possible different schools, School A and School B, the same task, for instance, might be marked in a different way across the two schools. What NESA will do is look at the HSC exams, and it might be, as an example in this case, the actual HSC marks are identical in both schools. So if that happened to be the case, what would happen with the assessment marks is that they would be moderated so that they would match those HSC results. And so in that graphic there, in that example, both schools' results would end up being the same, even though the marks that went into NESA are on a different scale to each other. They get moderated against the school's performance in that particular HSC exam for that subject. And that takes place in all subjects across the state in all schools. All right, so determining your HSC marks, as I said, 50% of your mark comes from your moderated assessment mark, 50% comes from your moderated exam mark, and they get added together. And there's two examples there, one student with a Band 6 result, one student with a Band 4 result, both with an examination mark of 88%. And the difference there is their assessment marks were different in both cases. One student did very, very well in their school-based assessment. The other student didn't do particularly well. Perhaps they were a bit lazy. Perhaps they didn't do all the assessment tasks. Perhaps there was a task that they didn't hand in. And so therefore their school-based assessment task mark has been affected and has gone in at a lower mark than the other student. And therefore it's affected significantly their HSC result. So that gives you an idea of why school-based assessment tasks are critical and really, and you must do as well as you possibly can in each of those assessment tasks. Each course has their own performance bands, and there are no predetermined marks or no predetermined distribution of those performance bands. They are set each year by senior markers at the HSC marking centres, and they determine what constitutes a Band 6 for that year based on course performance descriptors. What's the difference between the HSC and the ATAR? The HSC is obviously the result that all students in Year 12 will receive. Everybody will receive a HSC provided you meet the criteria and you do all the work. ATAR is for students who wish to go to university, and it's purely a rank determined by the university's admissions centre for gaining access to universities. So if you're not interested in going to university, an ATAR is not something that you need to know about. But if you are interested in going to university, you will need to apply to have an ATAR calculated for you. And remember, it is a rank, it is not a mark. It is a rank on your performance of your exams against all other students in the state for that particular year. It's calculated by University's Admissions Centre, UAC. It's based on your NESA exam marks and your moderated assessment marks that NESA provide to UAC. UAC then do a calculation process, a mathematical process, and it's based on your English mark and then your next best 8 units of marks, and to come up with an ATAR for that year. How do you get the best ATAR? Well, you work really hard. The best ATARs are for students who perform really well in all of their subjects. Not one subject in particular. You need to be consistent across all your subjects to get a really good ATAR. So do your best in each course, do your best in each assessment task, and do your best in each subject that you have. Consistent hard work is the best way to get the best ATAR. All right, let's have a look at a couple of HSC school-based assessment rules. None of this is new. Our school-based assessment rules for the HSC are the same assessment rules we've had in place since Year 7. You've been training for the HSC since the first day you walked in as a Year 7 student. And I've said this to you before. I've said this to you when you were in Year 10, and I said this to you last year in Year 11, and throughout this year earlier when you were doing the Year 11 course. But now that you're in Year 12, those school rules are critical, because if you do something that's against those rules and we have to give you a penalty, that will affect your moderated assessment mark. So make sure you know what the rules are, make sure you hand in your tasks on time, and make sure you complete all the work as it is asked of you of your teachers. Therefore, there'll be no penalties applying to you. You can see there on the slide that the school's assessment tasks are based on the syllabus, and they're based on trying to get you to produce your best performance in each of those tasks. Course performance assessment schedules are no different to what they were in Year 11. They look the same, but they will have the number of tasks that you need to complete, the outcomes to be assessed, the approximate due dates, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, and the weightings for each tasks. They look something like that, as you know from looking at your Year 11 booklet, and you will be in receipt of a Year 12 booklet from your PC teacher in the next day or so if you haven't already received it. Let's have a look at the assessment task information. A notification of each task will go out and is part of the HSC assessment handbook. Task information is provided to you at least 10 days prior to each task, and again, that's no different to what you've experienced in Year 11. It will be on the relevant library's subject page, and you can download it from there. Being away on a particular day is no excuse for not knowing what this task is about. You can always download it off the site. Task assessment, I will share with you, or you will be shared with, a Google assessment calendar, and that is live, just like you had in Year 11, just like you had in Year 10. It's exactly the same. Term 4 tasks this year are already on that Google calendar, and it will update next year for next year's tasks in 2021 once the timetable is set. But that will be in 2021. But Term 4 2020 tasks are already set there. Most tasks are between week 6 and week 9. And you'll be able to look at that when that is shared with you. It's your responsibility to both check that Google Calendar and the library site to make sure you know about those tasks. If you don't check those, that's your responsibility. It is not a basis for an appeal that you can launch. Please note the submission details on the tasks. Some will be physical hand-in, some will be in-class tests, some will be Google uploads. So each task will have a different submission type, and it's your responsibility to know the style and the format that task needs to be submitted by. Okay, it is not the teacher's responsibility to individually get that task from you. You need to know how to go about submitting the task. Illness misadventure is no different from junior school. If you're sick on the day of a task that you have to attend, say an in-class test, you will require a doctor's certificate, and you will fill in an illness misadventure form in the office in the same way as you may have done throughout junior school and throughout Year 11. That process is no different in Year 12. However, the penalties for not following that process are larger because they affect your moderated assessment mark, as I have said about 4 times this evening already. So please be aware of those rules. If you are sick, you have to get a doctor's certificate for those days when you are sick that affects your submission of tasks. If you're not sure, come and speak to me or Mrs. Martin. Work placement. Now, work placement hasn't taken place this year because of COVID, but next year, work placement will be back, and work placement should take place in most vet courses. So if you're on work placement when a particular task is due, that is not an excuse not to submit the task. The task is still due for submission. You'll need to be organised and make sure it gets submitted before you go on your work placement, or still submit it while you're on your work placement before the due date. If it's an in-class task that you can't attend because of the work placement, you'll need to apply for an extension before the work placement takes place. And not the Friday afternoon before that. I mean at least a week before you go on work placement. So please be aware of that. If you're not sure about that, you can always come and speak to me about that, and we might say a bit more about that next year when work placement starts up again. All right. All of you completed All My Own work about 12 months ago at the end of year 10, and you know about scholarship, you know about plagiarism in particular, and you know that you have to submit all your own work and you cannot take somebody else's work and present it as yours. So those rules are critical in the HSC. Now, this year, Year 12 that have gone through this year have been fantastic. We have had nobody infringe those plagiarism rules in Year 12. I would like you to be in the same position. I don't want any of you people infringing those rules in Year 12 this year. Again, if you do infringe though, they impact your results and you run the risk of getting a 0 for that task. If you're not sure, check with your teachers before you submit a task about whether it is referenced properly. And your teachers, while they won't be able to give you feedback on the quality of your task, they will be able to tell you if it is referenced correctly. And so please, make sure you know what you're doing with referencing, because that's where most issues come up with Year 12 students. If there is problems with malpractice, NESA requires me to report it to them. So it's not just an internal school matter, it's an external NESA matter as well. So if I do end up having to give you 0 for a particular task because of plagiarism, NESA has to be informed of that fact as well. So please, I don't want to do that. Make sure you get the rules correct and that you know the referencing rules. If you want more information, where can you get that? Well, NESA's website has a whole raft of resources there for Year 11 and Year 12 students. And so you can go to NESA's website and you can look up a whole range of material there. As well as NESA's website, you've got your own Students Online account. If you haven't yet activated your Students Online account, you need to activate that now, because that is how you will do lots of interactions with NESA, and that's how you'll receive your results in 12 months' time. So activate your account if you haven't already done so. The assessment handbooks, you will get a hard copy of the assessment handbooks from your PC teacher. Now, you may have already received that. If not, you can ask your PC teachers tomorrow about when you're receiving those hard copy of those books. Thank you for listening. And as I said, if there's any problems, any questions this term, if you could refer them to either Mr. Munro or Mrs. Martin. Mrs. Martin in particular will be dealing with illness misadventures and subject changes. So if you want to talk to her about those, please approach her. I wish you the best for Term 4 2020, and I'll see you all again in 2021. Thank you very much.